Hey guys, this is Final Fantasy Fan coming to you guys with another video. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Sega Genesis, released in 1989, and was one of the first 16-bit consoles out there next to the TurboGrafx 16. The Super Nintendo didn't come out until 2 years later, and this was meant to compete with Nintendo's NES, since Super NES just wasn't out yet. And I think that's why they posted 16-bit right there in chrome lettering, just to let you know that it has better graphics. And I think some versions of the Model 1 had high-definition graphics up there, which means you have one of the first copies. And this console is not my favorite console of all time. That would be the Super Nintendo, but it is nice to have in your collection. I'd probably prefer the Model 2. Basically because it's smaller and more lighter and stuff, and the cartridges load in better. Let's check in the back. These are the hookups in the back, and I think it's like way more than necessary. This is where the AC adapter plug would go in. I have no idea what this is for. You have your RF out, your channel select, and whatever the heck this thing is. I think if they would have taken off the EXT and whatever the heck this is, then it would be much more smaller and more compact. Now, this was found in a dumpster by my dad. He found it and gave it to me since I was just beginning to get into old gaming stuff. So I was excited, and I got a couple games with it, 2 controllers, and it worked. This is your power switch. Simple enough. If it was plugged in, it would have lit up red. It's a Sega Genesis right there. You have a reset switch, which is basically just what it is, reset. And then you have your headphone jack in case you want to plug in headphones, listen to it through your headphones. Like if back then if you're playing it in the living room, your parents like turn down that noise. You can just plug in your headphones and use the volume switch for the headphones here, which I think is really necessary because my TV's right there. This is my room, so unless my parents come in here and say turn down that noise, then I'll use this. But I think this is just unnecessary. Yeah, ridges in here. I'd say it's a pretty cool design model. It has this giant circle around in the center stuff. The cartridges load in like so. You push down like that, and that's how the cartridges go in. Stuff. You have 2 controller ports, which is, normal. Most of them have just 2 controller ports. This is what the cartridge looks like in the back when it's plugged in. I don't know what this is for. Probably just there. Okay. This is what a typical Sega Genesis cartridge looks like. This is Miss Pac-Man. It's what's smaller than the NES cartridges in the Super Nintendo. This is the cartridge slot. On the Model 1, it's the controller, not controller, the cartridge input. It's like dented in there, so when you put it in, it's like buried down in there. The Model 2, it would just show the whole cartridge basically. All right. Originally, when you bought the Model 1 in 1989, the Sega Genesis would come bundled with Altered Beast, which I don't have actually. But then in 1991, Sega produced a mascot, which was Sonic the Hedgehog. And then if you would have bought a Sega Genesis in 1991, the Genesis would become bundled with Sonic the Hedgehog. So yeah, Sonic was their mascot in 1991, basically when Super NES was out and they wanted to compete. Because, Nintendo had Mario, and, Sega had Sonic. So basically, Sonic is basically one of the best selling games for the Genesis out there. Continuing sequels like Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 would in Sonic and Knuckles, I think, would appear on the Genesis. And, what do you know, all 4 of them are awesome. Although Sonic and Hedgehog was considered to be Sonic 4. But nope, Sonic 4 is already on its way. Alright, so it would come out with Sonic the Hedgehog and stuff. What was I supposed to say? Oh, the controller. This is what a Sega Genesis controller looks like. Unfortunately, this one is, well, it works. It's just that the wire is breaking. So that's what it looks like. The best part about the controller that everyone thinks is obviously the D-pad, because it was unlike anything people have ever seen from a D-pad before. The D-pad was basically first created with the Game & Watch handhelds from the early 1980s. Then it was ported onto the NES, where the NES, not the NES, the D-pad became most recognizable in video game controllers. And this one had these little corner arrows there, so it's not just a regular D-pad and stuff. This time you can go diagonally without having to hold left and up at the same time. You can just hold down the corner button. This especially comes handy in games like Mortal Kombat when you're trying to shoot Sub-Zero's ice balls. Instead of doing down, forward, A, you could just do the diagonal button down like that and hit A. It works all the time. And speaking of great games, usually, before I get to the games, let's get to the box art. This is what a typical Sega Genesis box art would look like if you bought it from '89 to maybe early '92. It would look like that. But later, Sega uses a different box art. Let's take a look at Mortal Kombat, which came out in '92 or '93. As you can see, it's much different. So let's compare these side by side. On the early design box art, it says Sega Genesis at the top. Although here, it has a red bar, and it says it like that. Sega, and then you tilt it like that, and then it would say Genesis. Sega would continue this box art from the Sega CD to the Sega 32X. And many Sega Genesis games would appear on the 32X in CD. Like Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat appeared on the Sega CD. But not many people played it because the Sega CD and 32X were complete failures. And I think the boxes might be bigger than each other. Hang on. Yeah, this box is like 1/4 of an inch bigger, I think. So that's basically what the boxes would look like, and the cartridges were all the same. But then there were some games that came very late in the Genesis library that not many people played because they came late when the Genesis was basically dead due to the Sega CD and the Sega 32X. Like Castlevania Bloodlines. That's an old game that came out in 1994, and the Genesis life just pretty much ended in 95 or 96. By 95, Sega Saturn was out, and by 96, you know, Sony and Nintendo were dominating the market, and Nintendo was just coming out with Nintendo 64. Because Castlevania Bloodlines is actually a very great game in the Castlevania series. And as much as a Castlevania fan I am myself, it's pretty dang hard, especially on the second stage. That's basically all I have to say about the Sega Genesis. It's a great console if you're collecting old video games. It's one of the most recognizable game consoles out there. And, you know, it's nice to get, especially a Super Nintendo. One more thing about the controllers, it came with 3 buttons where the NES came with 2. And the start button was up here, which is odd because I keep mistaking. I keep pressing here, I don't feel it. I'm like, oh, it's up here. And Sonic only used 1 button where Mario used 2. So, yeah, I forgot to do the whole controller and stuff. Well, I'm almost at 10 minutes, so I'll see you guys in my next video.